This is the AMDM, your quick morning podcast full of Memphis news. I'm Natalie Van Gundy. Today is Tuesday, June 16th. Inspire Community Cafe is closing its doors. The Binghamton Cafe opened in January 2019. The cafe's last day will be Saturday, June 27th, with hours from 8 to 1:30 at the location at 510 Tillman Street. From 1:30 to 3 that day, the Inspire team will host a small party to thank their customers. On social media, the Inspire team wrote, "Though this phase of our journey is ending, we remain hopeful about what comes next." The man acquitted last year of being the mastermind behind the killing of Memphis rapper Young Dolph has been arrested on new charges unrelated to that case. According to the Memphis Police Department, Hernando High was charged with harassment and stalking in connection with a domestic incident reported on June 4th. Govan allegedly repeatedly harassed the victim, threatened to shoot up her residence, and then said he would post explicit content of her on social media. On June 10th, authorities issued a warrant for Govan's arrest. He was taken into custody without incident last week and remains behind bars at the Shelby County Criminal Justice Center. His next court appearance has not been set yet. And now it's time for a look at one of the week's biggest stories with Mary Casciola. But stay with us after that for more of the day's news.
When Southaven police recently arrested a substitute Hernando High School teacher for possessing child pornography, it raised some eyebrows and some questions. Over the past year, enough of the headlines out of North Mississippi have centered on child pornography, sexual assault, and statutory rape that members of the community have wondered what is going on. I'm Mary Casciola. Today, North Mississippi reporter Aaron Fleming joins us to talk about what the data shows and how the area compares to Memphis and other parts of Mississippi. Aaron, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's talk about this really quickly. You were the Memphis public safety reporter, but you recently moved, not physically, but now you are our North Mississippi reporter.
That is right. I am still avoiding the state income tax in Mississippi by residing in the great city of Memphis. But yes, I have switched beats after a couple of years on the crime beat in Memphis, or we call it public safety of the Daily Memphian. I have now switched to covering the suburbs.
And when you are covering North Mississippi, you are not just covering public safety, but you're covering like small business, road projects, government, all of that as well, right?
That's right. Anything and everything that's happening in DeSoto County, for the most part, is in my purview at the moment. So
okay. I mean, this story is a public safety story. You brought some experience with you.
That is correct. I definitely have, and I'm glad that coming into this from the crime beats, it's definitely helped with this and kind of knowing where to look for things and how to go about it. So
definitely. Tell us what has been going on. What sort of brought this into the public consciousness?
So really, this kind of started recently with the arrest of this Hernando High School teacher, a guy named Preston Lewis. Mm-hmm. He was arrested for, essentially the allegation is that he created this AI image of a child between, I think, 4 and 6 years old, mm-hmm.
performing
some sort of sexual thing. And so that started with his arrest. But this has been going on in the community for, some time. There's been arrests over time in the last couple of years for this, for similar things. They usually call it child exploitation, but that's essentially child pornography charges.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people have been concerned, particularly on social media, about this and essentially just kind of wondering, like, what is in the water?
Right, because there's so many headlines.
Right. And so that's kind of how this started. And that's where I came in, just sort of wanting to look at, like, is there really a unique problem with this in DeSoto County? Because, of course, one case of this is too many. And that was sort of the hard thing about it is, like, how do you go about this in a way that doesn't minimize what's happening,
mm-hmm.
but also putting into perspective, DeSoto County, like looking really at the data and trying to really look at that and tell people factually, like, what is happening with this.
Right. I think one of the cases that made the most headlines was the Lindsay Whiteside case. I think she entered a guilty plea in state court last year, but some people felt like that wasn't enough. And there was some fallout from like local government bodies. I mean, it just felt like that was like a big story that sort of kept continuing on. And I do think sometimes with media coverage, we have a situation where like more media coverage begets more media coverage because people sort of get a narrative in their mind and they're like, oh, that happened and then this happened. Like, let's talk about what you found. What data did you look at for this story?
Right. And so what I did here is the Mississippi Department of Public Safety, they post numbers online regarding these things. They do a lot of stuff. The Department of Safety does a lot of things, but they also do similar to like TBI in Tennessee, they which posts annual crime stats and things like that online. The Department of Safety in Mississippi also does that. And so you can go back several years and kind of look at crime stats from different law enforcement agencies, and for different crimes, of course, violent crime and other things. And so it was actually fairly easy to go through and just kind of look at like, here's what DeSoto County Sheriff's Office reported for 2024 and 3 and 2 and going back. Same with Horn Lake and Olive Branch. And so what I did was I just sort of compiled all these numbers that I could find from the different law enforcement agencies in DeSoto County. The Walls Police Department notably does not report numbers to this database, but that's also a very small town also, so they may not have a ton to report as it is. But basically, I just looked at that and just compiled the numbers and looked at what the trends were over the last couple of years. Some of the data, once you go back far enough, the different agencies, like some didn't report one year, some did. And so I basically just started, I think around 2019, where they'd all reported, everybody reported the numbers, and then going forward and then looking at the trends since then. And you can see that there was definitely a spike during the pandemic around 2021 of these cases of violent sexual offenses, non-consensual sexual offenses where children were victims. There's a spike of cases that year, but it's fallen since then. And again, one case is too many, but you definitely see that it's falling, and it didn't just start like exploding last year or anything like that, in comparison to some of the public outrage.
Right. And it's not just for North Mississippi. Like North Mississippi is not an outlier. That's
right. And talking to the DA about this, specifically who, is very, sort of tough on crime and is really taking that stance. Even talking to him, he, flat out says, no, I don't think that we have a unique issue with this. What he believes is going on is kind of like what you mentioned about sort of the media coverage and things, is that when these things happen, his office, in terms of trying to be transparent, they will put out a release and say, hey, this is what happened. This is why this guy got charged. And when you see posts like that over and over again, it can kind of make it feel like there's a huge problem with it. But then again, looking at the data, it's not a unique issue to DeSoto County. There are other counties dealing with this, and we're in DeSoto County. In fact, is not the worst, county for these things. If you look at the number of registered sex offenders in DeSoto County, it's the lowest of the 5 biggest counties in Mississippi. And so he's correct in saying that there isn't a unique problem with this. It's a problem, but as much as it is anywhere else.
You did say that there were some, like in the story, some of the numbers seem like there were larger than other places in the aggregate, but those numbers also weren't, I guess, like adjusted by per person or by the population, right?
That's right. I mean, the law enforcement numbers, for the numbers of non-consensual sexual offenses against children that I use as kind of a baseline between the different agencies, those were not adjusted for population. Those are raw, just incidents that were reported over the years, and then we looked at the trend lines between them. The registered sex offenders I did do by population, and looking at, because the Department of Safety also just gives you, they keep a database of the number of registered sex offenders in each county. You can look. I pulled the 5 most populous, which includes DeSoto and some other counties, and it'll give you a total and say, hey, this is how many you get for each county. And so then I was able to just take that, look at census population statistics, and say, hey, this is how many we have per 10,000 residents or so. And then you see that DeSoto County is the lowest.
Okay. So yeah, it is lowest in there. So it really is just sort of what we're talking about. And this seems to be in the public consciousness, and it's sort of building up, and that's what we're seeing. What is your takeaway with all of this?
I think I agree with the DA in that it's not, a unique problem in DeSoto County, but as he also said, like one is too many.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing, again, is not trying to minimize the fact that it's a problem anywhere when it happens. But controlling the what the public thinks about it in terms of, is this like an epidemic, and what is the true nature of this? And then also just as media, again, like I think what happens is that these things happen. And so some media will report on it, and then and then more people get outraged. So we report on it more because that's what they're looking for. And then all of a sudden it looks like it's an epidemic. And so what I'm trying to do is really just kind of cut through some of the noise and say, hey, this is what's really going on. Like, do we need to calm down a bit? Can we sort of be at peace? That sort of thing.
Right. So not an epidemic.
Correct.
Aaron, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And now, more news.
Hillwood Investment Properties has broken ground on the first industrial building in its planned Marshall Trade Center in Byhalia, Mississippi. Andy Ashby says the 1.15 million square foot building will be the first speculative building in the Memphis metro area in 3 years.
The Dallas-based real estate developer has developed or acquired nearly 40 buildings in the Memphis market, totaling 23.3 million square feet. It owns more than 3 million square feet of Class A warehouse and distribution space locally. The new spec building, which is large enough to hold 50 Boeing 737 planes, will have more than 200 dock doors and 2 drive-in doors. For the Daily Memphian, I'm Andy Ashby.
Mississippi Secretary of State Michael Watson has instructed staff to begin preparing the state's election management system for a return to the 2022 legislative maps. Aaron Fleming says this is according to a letter sent to Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann and House Speaker Jason White.
Watson said in the June 9th letter the direction is due to the April Louisiana versus Calais Supreme Court decision, which led to a national redistricting battle, including the redrawing of congressional lines in Tennessee that split Memphis into 3 districts. Watson's letter also says that no changes can be made to the state system while elections are in process, and that changes are barred from 60 days before this year's election on November 3rd through mid-December when it is set to be certified. For the Daily Memphian, I'm Aaron Fleming.
That's the AMDM for this Tuesday, June 16th. I'm Natalie Van Gundy. Find links to all of the stories mentioned in this episode in the podcast description. Listen and subscribe to this podcast anywhere you get your podcasts or on the Daily Memphian's website. You can also hear us on WYXR 91.7, where our local news stories air every weekday throughout the day. Don't forget to subscribe to our other weekly podcasts hosted by your favorite reporters, including Soundbites, the Daily Memphian's Food and Dining podcast with Holly Whitfield, The Sidebar, the Daily Memphian's Arts and Culture podcast with Eric Barnes, and the Daily Memphian Grizzlies podcast with Drew Hill and Chris Harrington. You can also sign up for our breaking news alerts and our many weekly newsletters we offer by visiting dailymemphian.com/email. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to start your day here again tomorrow.